This is the Smart Poker Study Podcast for players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Through strategy discussions, Q&As, and Poker Pro interviews, we'll dive deep into everything related to poker tactics, study techniques, and the mental side of the game. All in an effort to improve your skills, maximize your profits, and to make you a lifelong successful player. This podcast is brought to you by SmartPokerStudy.com, and I'm your host, Sky Matsuhashi. Poker people, make sure you listen to episode 3, where I talked about how the incredible book called The One Thing has revolutionized my life and my poker game. Hey poker people, and welcome to my first Friday Q&A episode. It's a beautiful rainy day here in Fresno, and man, do we need it. Thank you, El Nino. As you know, this show is posted in iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and many other places, and occasionally the show gets some killer reviews. I got one recently from Triune51. It was titled Awesome Poker Podcast. And he said, I love this podcast. It's helped me tremendously with my poker playing. Sky gives great insight and teaches the game of poker very well. Hopefully, I can get my skills up to where I can play in the WSOP. All right, well, thank you very much for that, Triune. I appreciate it, and I will do my best to keep giving you great poker strategy and study tips and everything to get you to the WSOP and win a bracelet or 3. So please subscribe, everybody, to the Smart Poker Study Podcast through your favorite podcast app, whatever it is, and leave a review to help others discover the show.
Where do you live?
In the city.
Do you have a house?
Apartment.
Own or rent?
Rent.
What do you do for a living?
Lots of things.
Where's your office?
I don't have one.
How come?
I don't need one.
Where's your wife?
Don't have one.
How come?
It's a long story.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
How come?
It's an even longer story.
Are you my dad's brother?
What's your record for consecutive questions asked?
38.
I'm your dad's brother, all right.
Man, I love that scene from Uncle Buck. What a great movie. And Macaulay was a cool little kid, of course. And I totally miss John Candy. He made some great movies back in the day, and it's hard to believe he's been gone for 20 whole years. Jeez. But anyway, today's question comes from LTU Maximus. LTU might stand for Lithuania, be my guess. But anyway, Maximus says, Hello, Sky. I had a situation yesterday. Just a very short description about the players. Under the Gun +1 is so bad with a VPIP of 62, PFR of 2, and a cbet of 100 on the flop and the turn. The big blind has a VPIP of 12, PFR of 1. I'd really appreciate it if you let me know your thoughts. Would you call the river all-in? But I think in that kind of situation, it's inevitable. And he ends it with a little smiley face. So we shall see. Let's get into this hand. If you'd like to follow along, go to the show notes at smartpokerstudy.com/4, and the hand replayer is right there, so you can follow the action as I talk about it. And, I just mentioned a lot of little acronyms that some of you might not really know. VPIP is voluntarily put money in the pot. And this is a percentage that shows how often this guy plays a hand. So, for example, this first guy was a VPIP of 62. That means he comes in and he plays 62% of hands. He plays more than half of the hands that he's dealt. So we all know this is a very loose guy, loves to come into pots, The other number was, or the other stat was PFR, or pre-flop raise. He only raises 2%, which, as you know, is probably like jacks are better or queens are better, and ace king is basically it. I mean, this guy raises the best hands there is. And cbet, of course, stands for continuation bet. These are bets that you make on the flop, the turn, and the river, assuming you were the pre-flop raiser. So this guy raises 2% of hands. He raises very strong hands. So, of course, he's going to be c-betting a lot because he's either going to hit a set, like a top set on the flop, have an overpair, or have, top pair with top kicker with an ace king, that kind of thing. So you can understand why he c-bets so much. So what we have here, looking at the hand replayer, we've got a 5-cent, 10-cent, full ring, no limit hold'em game, and our hero is Under the Gun with 7-7. And before we review the hand, let's discuss our opponents just a little bit more. So he said that Under the Gun is a 62-2 player, which means he plays 62% hands, only raises 2%, and he's a bad player, which with the stats of 62-2 means he is a super loose passive guy. So if we think about that, what do we know really about loose passive players? Well, in general, they're stations. They love to see flops. They love to try to hit flops and take stacks with terrible hands like 9-deuce suited, stuff like that. They prefer checks and calls over bets and raises, and So if they do come in raising or betting, firing on various streets, you've got to watch out. They most likely have a hand that they like, a strong hand that they want to see the river with, and they're trying to get money out of you. So loose passive players, watch out for those bets and raises, and checks and calls are what you can often expect. And their stations, they'll call you down quite light. And this other guy, the big blind, he's kind of a tight passive guy. At a 12-1 means he plays 12% of hands. Well, 12% is like pocket fives and better, and good suited aces, good suited Broadway cards. Offsuit aces, maybe like ace jack, ace 10 and better, and maybe king queen offsuit, maybe a couple other offsuit Broadways. But I mean, he plays generally a very strong range, probably not too many suited connectors in it, most likely just all big cards. And just like the other guy, he only raises. I mean, at 1%, this guy's just raising aces and kings, basically. You could think of it that way. Maybe ace king suited and ace queen as well. But, he raises a very strong range. And maybe opposite of the loose passive player, he's quick to fold post flop. If he doesn't hit the flop, he's out of there. And just like the loose passive guy, though, if he comes in raising, you've got to watch out. He's got a hand there. He does prefer checks and calls over bets and raises, but when he has a hand, he's getting it in without a doubt. Wanting to push you off of your draw or to get max value out of you, So let's hit the hand right here. We are under the gun, and we choose to limp under the gun. Now, I think, Maximus, that this is the biggest mistake that you made in the hand. When you're playing a cash game, if a hand is worth playing, it's worth coming in for a raise. You should never limp, and you should never limp behind with a hand. And there's a few reasons for this. The best way that we profit from weak players is we charge them when they've got an inferior hand. And these two players, they play kind of weak ranges, and our sevens are most likely better than most of the hands that they play. We've got to charge them now, start building the pot now. And one of the reasons why we want to build the pot is because bigger pots magnify the mistakes of our opponents. So our opponents are going to make mistakes because they play such crappy ranges. We play stronger ranges. We come in for a raise. They call our raise with hands that shouldn't be calling. Well, the bigger the pot is, the bigger their mistake. So as they make mistakes, down the streets, we make more money if we can grow the pot. So that's another reason why you always want to raise any hand that you come in with. And raising every hand also hides info from your opponents. So, for example, you could be raising under the gun here with pocket deuces. You could be raising with 10 jack suited, pocket sevens like you have. It could be aces. It could be ace king offsuit. They're not going to know if every time you come in for a raise. Now, take the under the gun +1, for example, the 62-2 player. So if this guy limps in, he has a wide, super crappy range. But if he comes in for a raise, he's got a strong hand, and you can easily ditch your hand. Well, you don't want to be easily read like this guy is, without a doubt. You want to come in for a raise every time so your opponents cannot read you. And another reason to always raise is because it makes you stick to a strong hand selection pre-flop. So if you're enticed by a hand, like you look down at 10-8 suited and you think, oh, I want to play this because it can flop such good hands, but you know that you need to raise to come in, you'll think twice and you'll fold it as you probably should, in a hand like 10-8 suited, especially from early position. So those are some of the reasons why you want to always come in for a raise. So I would say your limp right here is definitely, a mistake in the hand. So you limp in, the under the gun, the super fishy player limps behind, a middle position player limps in, and the button, the small blind, and the big blind all check. So we've got a terrible situation right now. We've got pocket sevens with 3 players to act behind us, 2 players before us. So we've got pocket sevens in a 6-way limped pot. The only way we're going to win this is really to hit something. We have very little fold equity. How can we bet out with just a measly pocket sevens? On most flops, turns, and rivers, how are we going to get 5 other players to fold unless we try to commit a ton of chips to this pot? And it's just not a good situation. We've basically limited ourselves to the only way winning is to hit something. So let's see what happens. The flop comes down ace 6-3 rainbow. So already we missed our flop. We missed our set. We were probably trying to set mine with this limp in the first place. So it's best here just to check fold. Don't even throw a donk at it. If we donk bet here, I guarantee we're going to get called by one or two players with an ace. So many of these weak players limp in with weak aces all the time that we can't fire here. It's a check fold situation. But what happens is everybody checks. All 6 players check. So somebody could be still playing an ace. Somebody could even have a set of sevens, or a set of 6s or 3s right now. I'm hoping that somebody else would bet and nobody did. So we get to see a turn and still the limped pot. The turn comes a 7. So it's amazing. We actually turned our gin card. We turned the maybe second best possible hand. It's doubtful that someone has pocket aces for a higher set, but it is possible that someone could have the 4-5 that they limped in with, maybe, a 4-5 of spades or something that they limped in pre, and they hit their open ender right there on the turn. It's possible, but most likely we have the best hand right now. So I'm saying we've got to bet, try to get some of these players out and get somebody with a weak ace to call us and to give us some chips. So what happens is the small blind checks, and the big blind, he's the 12-2 player, remember. So such a passive guy decides to come in for a 3/4 pot bet, 45 cents into a 60-cent pot. Well, remember what we said about tight passive players. When they come in for a bet, they usually have some kind of a good hand. They prefer checks and calls, but now this guy decides to bet. He's got something. He liked that 7 in some way. Well, I think we've got a raise here. Folding's out of the question, of course, with the second best hand. And calling I don't like because it could entice a lot of these other guys. You think about it, the board is 3, 6, 7, ace. Well, there's a ton of 5s, of 4s, 4, 5, 5, 8. I mean, there's a ton of different draws out there. Plus, you have 2 clubs on the board. You've got to raise now to kind of limit the field to get value out of this guy that thinks he has a good hand, and at the same time, try to get a lot of the flush draws and straight draws out of there. So I would make it at least $1.50, at least 3 times his bet to discourage action from all these other weaker players. You want to limit the field now because really you can't stand many river cards coming. But you decide to just call. The under the gun +1 calls. So now what we have is a 3-way pot. Let's take a look. I'm watching the action go here. Okay, we have $2 in the pot, 20 big blinds. The river comes in ace of clubs, which makes the board ace, ace, 7, 3, 6. So we have a full house. It's the under full, but there's 3 clubs out there, so someone could have a flush, but the aces are on the board, which means now that there are 3 different full houses that beat us. Ace 7, ace 3, ace 6. But let's see what happens here. So $2 in the pot. The guy who led out on the turn, the big blind, chooses to lead out again for another 3/4 pot bet. Now, that screams strength to me. The river came a paired ace. He could have just checked in early position, hoping someone else would bet so he could check raise the flop. It's always possible. And now remember what we said, tight passive players coming out for bets equals strength. So we really have to be aware of that. Now that you played the hand the way it is, you have a full house, but you're easily beaten by better full houses. I would just call here. Calling this would net you roughly a 50 BB pot, which is pretty good, assuming nothing else happens, assuming your call ends the action and under the gun +1 folds. So I'm fine with just calling here. You're winning a 50 BB pot with kind of an inferior hand. So I think I would do that. I don't think I would come in for a raise, especially with one player left to act right here. I would probably call, and then if the other guy came in for a raise, I would assess it, So, but you decide to make a min raise, and then now all of a sudden on this river paired board, our under the gun +1 super passive 62-2 player decides to come in for a shove for 148 big blinds. That is a crazy big bet. He's willing to commit his whole stack, 1.5 buy-ins to this pot on the paired river. Now that screams strength. And just think about also, it's a river 3-bet. How often does a river get 3-betted in a 3-way pot? Not often at all. This guy is screaming strength. It could be a flush, of course, and maybe he's just so passive and weak he doesn't realize the paired board he could be up against a full house. It's possible. But he commits 148 big blinds. the big blind comes in and commits the rest of his 91 big blind stack. So you've got 2 players all in on this paired board river. You've got the under full. I think it's time to fold. Just chalk it up to a poorly played hand. You lost 40 BBs, but you're not losing your 135 BB stack that you have behind. I say you've got to fold here because these 2 passive players showed so much strength on a paired river. And this is when the strength really and their betting and raising really amped up on the river, on the paired river. So you know that ace has to help somebody. It could just be the club, but I wouldn't risk it, and I would just have to fold here. I would have called the river bet and then folded to any further action. But let's see what you do. Playing the hand, you make the call. The pot is a lovely 410 BB pot because you got all these stacks in, and you end up. We see the big blind has an ace 3 for aces full of 3s, and the under the gun +1 has aces full of 6s. He limped behind with an ace-6 pre. Now, looking at the hands here, this probably would have played out exactly the same way had you have raised pre, but it's possible you could have gotten away on the flop. So let's say if you would have raised pre, most likely that ace-6 still would have called, and the ace-3 would have called because these guys are such loose passive players. The ace-3 in the big blind would have gotten really good pot odds to make the call, so that's fine. You can see that happening. The ace-6 would have called because he's such a loose passive player anyway. He sees the ace. Hey, I got to call an ace. I can't give it up. Now, they both flop 2 pair. If you would have made a cbet right there, then one of them would have come over the top and raised, and you could have easily ditched. You would have saved yourself a ton of money by raising pre, c-betting, and then getting blown off of the hand, which would have just saved you money. So, kind of in review of this hand here, your open limp pre was a mistake. You're checking the flop because you open limp. You're checking the flop was okay, but just calling the turn when you should have raised to try to limit the field right there and to make some money from weaker hands or flush draws or a weak ace, that was a mistake as well. And then calling the river after 2 passive guys go all in, that was a mistake as well. But if anybody out there disagrees with me, please let me know. I want to learn from you just as you're trying to learn from me right now. If you see a better play at any time than I would have said, please let me know. I can review this hand again and let me learn from you as well. Challenge! Alright, so here's my challenge for you this episode. If you're a cash game player and you sometimes limp in, don't! If it's good enough to play, it's good enough for a raise. In your next 4 sessions, don't limp at all. Don't limp behind. Don't limp as first in. And see how this affects your hand selections and your post-flop play with these, which are hopefully tighter, stronger ranges. Now, it's your turn to take action and do something positive for yourself.
Oh, that's it now. Get out there and be somebody. Go write a book.
So please send me your constructive feedback on this episode. Did I nail the answer or did I totally butcher it? Please visit the show notes page at smartpokerstudy.com/4 and leave a comment there. You can also send me an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, tweet me at smartpokerstudy, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And I need your cues for the Friday episodes. Please send them to me through all the channels just mentioned. Your question can be related to anything poker, like how do I play Jack from under the gun, or how do I get a poker girlfriend? Whatever, I'm here for you. If I use your question, I'll give you a shout out in the episode and you'll be famous for a day, just like our good buddy Maximus here. Plus, if you've got an idea for a podcast topic you'd like me to discuss, I'd love to hear that as well. Alrighty, poker people. Be sure to listen to the next episode, number 5, where I discuss the most important skills that you need to have in order to crush your opponents, and the order in which you need to get those skills. If you enjoyed our time together and learned a little something, please share it with a friend. You can tweet out the link to the show notes, retweet my tweets, Facebook your friends about us, email your coworker, whatever. Word of mouth is the best advertising, and a recommendation from you to your friends would be most appreciated. Until next time, study smart, play hard, and make your next session the best one yet.